Hi everybody, welcome to Highs and Lows this week here in the Haymarket newsroom in Hong Kong. I'm Robert Sawatsky with Soon Chen Kung and Matthew Miller this week. We're going to run through what I think could be 4 lows. At least you'll make the argument that it's 4 lows. Probably maybe 3.5. We'll have a little debate at the end. So yeah, sorry that there's so many lows, but it's just that kind of
weeks are like that. Yep.
Exactly. I want to start with a very interesting story, which is the issue around ADK and basically the offer that Bain Capital has made to buy it for 1.3 billion that came in earlier this month. The story has taken a new turn. I mean, initially, sort of the bid came in. WPP, as we know, is ADK's largest shareholder. They own 25%. Initially, they were sort of just intimated that they were unhappy in terms of the price, that they felt it was undervalued, and other shareholders have come out and said the same thing. In its rationale for the deal, ADK had sort of said that they want to expand more globally, more digitally. They felt that kind of Bain Capital, this will kind of help them do that. Maybe they don't have as much pressure to right away to please shareholders, short term if they go the private route. So there's kind of they had some rationales for it, but this week it sort of changed a bit in that WPP came out with a statement that struck back at, I guess, kind of what some of what ADK was saying in some fairly harsh language too. They sort of attacked ADK's rationale, saying that ADK, in a sense, has consistently resisted opportunities to improve the performance of its overseas operations. So if you want to expand, they feel that on their own, the management hasn't been taking the steps. And the exploration of significant digital opportunities, preferring to invest in disastrous acquisitions and consolidations like Gonzo and others. Gonzo was the anime studio that ADK bought. And only to find out sort of after they bought them that they weren't quite reporting their books as in the right standards as they thought, and it ended up there were kind of far more debt than was originally kind of reported.
That line about preferring to make disastrous investments is the one that gets me, because so often what's presented to us as the media and presented to the rest of the world is like a very highly polished image of corporate harmony where everything is going perfectly, and nobody ever admits that anything's wrong. And this was a rare occasion where that veneer was dropped, and you saw one company walking very close to the line of just basically saying that their partner has been incompetent. They didn't say that word, but when you say you have a preference for disaster, that's pretty harsh.
Right, and then you have to wonder. I mean, why? Because you're sort of admitting that kind of this partnership is not working. Yeah. So it's hard now to see, whether or not this, the deal would go forward if for whatever reason kind of Bain would back out. How will this, affect their kind of relationship going forward? So in a way, it looks like WPP is not arguing we don't want this deal because our partnership has worked so well. They're definitely not saying that. Obviously, it's kind of clear from both sides that they both feel that it hasn't worked that well. So there's one main reason why WPP is doing this, and that is that message is purely to the shareholders to say, look, how can you trust management that this deal will do that when they've made these mistakes in the past? Therefore, vote against it. And there's one reason why they want to vote against it, and that is a higher price. They're not saying this is important for us to keep this investment, for us strategically long term or anything like that. We're really looking at kind of message to shareholders to get that price higher, and at that point, that's when we might kind of see a break between the two. So it will be interesting, like I said, to see what plays out, whether or not Bain does sweeten their offer, in which case we may see a kind of a break, or if not, what happens then. There's already the second largest shareholder also has come out against this deal as well. So there's already 40% or more of shareholders that are not going to vote in favor of this. So something I think has to happen. Want to move on to another story. Again, this is a kind of a definite low, in that today is actually the 1-year anniversary of the death of the Thai king, Bhumibol. And you wrote about this before, and we also had our colleague Fayez write about that in a premium piece this week as well.
Yeah, actually starting from this month, I already noticed many of my Thai friends and Thai brands, they change their avatars on Facebook and Instagram to black and white, and in fact, so, there was an internal memo, internal guideline, or I mean, it's a commonly held guideline that everyone should change their avatar symbols to black and white. So, when I was writing the story last year, it was kind of difficult to get comments from agencies and brands, especially brands, because they felt it was very distasteful to talk about loss in revenue during a time of national tragedy. And Fires also had the same problem, and he mentioned that in the story. But as proven by the figures, Nielsen figures, advertising ad revenue in fact dropped by $130 million in October, and we could expect
last October alone.
Yeah, just October alone, and we could expect the same decline this year, because like for this year, starting from today, there was already some partial ad blockout all the way till to end of this month, because 26th is the cremation day and funeral day, and from 25th to 27th there will be a pause in advertising delivery for all platforms, because it was during the cremation period, and many businesses, they announced that they're going to close on the 26th for banking, and like Tesco, Lotus, they also said that they will close their business earlier to allow employees to pay their respect. And well, Thai King, it was highly revered by the Thai people, and it was a national tragedy. When I was living in Thailand, you could expect like during major festivities or during his birthday or the birthday of the royal families, they would put out a special post, and they would do a lot of decor for people to write their messages in the memorial book. And they grew up loving the Thai King and knowing the Thai King because he was in reign for 70 years. And when I spoke to UN Thailand, they said they were caught off guard because nothing like that ever happened during their lifetime. But this year, marketers, they knew better because they were well prepared for what happened last year. There was an internal memo going around in UN Thailand. It was because at the time they didn't know what to do. There was a media shutdown, like TV, all stations, they went black and white. So this year, like they were kind of well prepared. The Digital Advertising Association, they released a guideline saying that all the activities that should be ceased, and I suppose they're also very well advised by the Thai royal family, the bureau, the office that manages the royal affairs. But brands, of course, they cannot spend money on advertising, but they're also doing it in a lot of ways that can, like such as providing support and services for the people to go to the royal palace to pay their respects. And in fact, in that way, brands can earn trust and a lot of good feelings among the consumers. They are part of the CSR responsibilities and good corporate citizenship to show that they care for the people and they want to emulate the footsteps of the Thai King in his lifetime.
And last year, I think that a lot of the existing sort of inventory that was out there was changed to sort of condolence messages and so on, right? On behalf of brands.
And for that also, IBG media brands, they mentioned that many of the clients, they cannot make long-term plans, so it's like very short plans, a few months, rather than plan a year ahead. And in fact, the Thai junta, they announced that they're going to have the elections next November, so we can expect a period of maybe. There was already economic slowdown before the king died, and so ongoing to that and political instability, there might be more slowdown in the coming months.
That's the thing that I noticed in Faiz's article too. He was talking a bit about that, slowdown. So it was almost like, double. I mean, again, we don't like to talk about this in kind of because we know of the reverence that Thais have. At the same time, we cover this business and it's unavoidable huge impact, right? So we have to cover it as well, just to kind of it's important for people to know about the changes and so on. But that was kind of, there was a slowdown already, but I think that also just there was a more impact on kind of the more expensive media, even too, as the year went on with TV and so on. Digital perhaps less so, but
I think it's a good it's rather extreme, but a good example of how brands need to be aware of local culture and make sure that they aren't doing anything, that stands out and makes them look insensitive. So,
yeah,
a good story to cover.
Yeah. The other story that we wanted to talk about was one that actually happened last Friday, sort of just after the this broadcast happened, and that was that we had a fine in the Dentsu so-called karoshi case for overwork.
Yeah, this story stretches back to I think December of 2015 when this young woman that worked for Dentsu died, and then last October, so a year ago, was when a government entity first said that Dentsu was responsible in part, at least, for her death. And obviously, the controversy over that led to the CEO resigning and being replaced towards the end of last year, right? I believe, yes, January. And so finally this week came to a resolution through a full trial, and in fact Dentsu was found, finally formally to be responsible, and was fined a rather small amount. A lot of the global media coverage, I guess, focused on the fact that it was a paltry fine.
It was 500,000 yen, which is about, in US dollar terms, it's about 4,420, which obviously is nothing, right?
Yeah.
Olivia and I, we had a guessing game before the results were out, and now we were guessing how much Dentsu was going to be. We said $50 million, but it turned out.
Well, that's the thing. So
Reuters misreported it. Reuters initially said $50,000 US, but it was actually...
Oh, they calculated it wrong?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, still, the Reuters headline was that Japan's Dentsu gets only a small fine. The Japan Times noted that it was a mere fine, and even the Nikkei Asian Review talked about it being like a token fine as well. So there's a lot of people kind of looking at that kind of fine amount.
Our colleague in Tokyo, David, who can't be with us here live, said that much of that reporting is a bit misguided because it's not the size of the fine. And he had a couple of points there. One, Dentsu has already compensated the victim's family in an undisclosed settlement. And then, secondly, what amount of money would actually hurt Dentsu? I mean, even that miscalculation of $50 million, that would be really nothing. But his larger point is that in Japan, regardless of the fine, the finding is damaging in and of itself. It's as a point of corporate reputation, it's a serious blow that it really does have an impact regardless of the dollar amount attached to it.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of what you think would be the biggest deterrent to doing this again. So an open trial, which Dentsu had to go through, was a bit unprecedented. So that was part of it. It was clearly kind of reputational, is what kind of some believe is the bigger deterrent here to Dentsu. It had to go through the open trial. It's been found, accountable to some extent, and that in itself is fairly damaging. Not so much maybe in other cultures elsewhere. People might say it doesn't matter if you don't have that financial, deterrent of kind of a big fine, or again, like you said, we don't know what they paid out in their own kind of private settlement. So there obviously could have been a much larger payout, but what is it between reputation and financial disincentive to do that? Because we all know that as part of this problem, there's economic implications to overwork as well, and having employees work overtime potentially to the benefit of the company as well.
Yeah.
So that's the issue that has to be worked out. What's interesting is that again, we saw early in October that the problem is persisting, right? But there was another high-profile overwork case now with the national broadcaster in Japan.
But that happened in 2013. That's even earlier. That was recently. That was recently.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Let's move on, I guess, to the last issue that we want to talk about. This is an opinion piece that Matt wrote about an ad that came out, a Nike ad. That was it. Yep,
I took what for us is a relatively rare step of writing just an outright opinion under my own name, and it's we sometimes joke about Nike and Wieden+Kennedy as being boring in their excellence, because most of the work that we get to see is just predictably excellent, and they do a great job of localizing for the different markets in Asia, and really nothing that you could complain about. This one struck me for reasons that I recognize may be a bit more personal, but I think it's a point of view worth exploring. So what we're talking about here is an ad that features a Hong Kong professional boxer named Rex So, yeah, who had a fight last weekend and won, and he was quite popular. But watching this ad, for me, I had a strange reaction to it. You see this boxer, and you see him interspersed with shots of people like running and falling down, or playing basketball and falling down on their backs and getting back up. And he, in the ad, takes a really severe blow to the head and falls down. And you see the referee counting out the 1, 2, 3, and he's struggling to remain conscious, fighting his way back to his feet, and then getting on with the fight. Which, obviously, that fits totally with Nike's usual theme of just get on with it, just do it. And obviously, it is a difficult thing to do, and you could say it's heroic, and people obviously think of it as a heroic storyline, and so fine. And I'm not saying anything about the craft of the ad, but I think certain activities, glorifying certain activities, is a little bit questionable of a choice for a brand. And so I'll turn now to like my own. I'm a great fan of American football, have been all my life. Love the game while watching the game, but in recent years it's become much more difficult to enjoy watching that game because there's been a lot of scientific evidence mounting that repeated blows to the head, even ones that don't result in a concussion, result in serious physical damage to the brain that can be detected on autopsy. And in life, before death, this is a condition called CTE, which leads to a whole host of problems: behavioral changes, depression, suicide, substance abuse, domestic violence, all these things as sort of byproducts of this brain damage. And it's not that most sports don't have risks of injury, they do, but for me, the sport that I love has started to tip into the area where that risk of serious, debilitating, life-changing injury is so high that it's not like a freak event. It's going to happen to a really significant number of the people who play that game. And then I look at boxing and say it's exactly the same thing, except that it's not just a byproduct of that game, it's actually the object of the game, is to inflict as much damage as you can on the other person's head. And so I just feel uncomfortable with that, and that's my personal opinion. But I think a brand like Nike that has made its fortune championing, like personal fulfillment and achievement, maybe ought to think about where is the line where they're comfortable supporting, certain sports that have such a damaging, result. And, because the brand money supports the sport, and that money draws young people to join that sport, and so you can't really pretend that you're not complicit in bringing people in to something that may be really damaging to their long-term health. So that was my opinion piece.
Right.
I've said my piece, but I know others don't quite agree with me, which is good.
But I think the whole point of sports sponsorship is very much about finding what resonates with the consumers, the sports fans. And for the sports fans, they admire the amount of training, sportsmanship, and the endurance of the athletes. So if it happens to be a so-called violent sport such as boxing, but it's something that resonates with the consumers. The brands may still find the incentive to do it. And like you mentioned MMA in your story,
Yep.
and MMA is one of the MMA is gaining in popularity. Like I'm currently working on a story on millennials, and beast mode was found to be the most popular trending terms among the millennials. And you can even find beast mode playlists on Spotify, and it's closely associated with sports such as MMA, CrossFit. So like Rick and I, my colleague, we went on the streets in Hong Kong recently to speak to a few millennials, and like probably like 7 out of 12 said their favorite brand is Nike. And we asked them why, and one of them said they like the slogan just like it, and they feel that they can relate to that. It pushes them to do better.
Yep.
And to see that on screen, and perhaps the message goes together with the creatives.
I just think that too. It's that boxing metaphor is the irresistible thing for brands, and that's why we have the Rocky movies, and so many Hollywood movies are made around boxing, because it's about that kind of underdog, that perseverance, that getting up you get knocked down, but you're going to get up off the floor and like keep going. And there's no like, yes, it happens in other sports, but boxing is the one where it's like that's exactly what it is. So it's that irresistible metaphor that draws the brands to it. So I mean, and the other, I guess, aspect of it is, you know, it's not at a kind of a tipping point probably as a societal issue yet because of maybe the small number of people that are involved in it, right?
Yep.
So if it was a thing where, you know, at some point kind of a government, you know, decides to kind of, you know, ban or put kind of rules around it, you know, and if attitudes change, but right now I think most people say it's like, well, it's their choice. They're, you know, they're participating in this sport. The other thing is I just think if it would be tricky for Nike to probably, I think that there's probably a first mover almost disadvantage to kind of say we're not going to participate in boxing because then all the other contact sports are on the line. Like you said, football, hockey, rugby, wherever there's kind of tackling. And suddenly that's kind of a lot of their core audience that they speak to are all of a sudden kind of saying, wait a minute, are you on our side or not? We're kind of all about kind of, you know, going for it. And that's, you know, that's where they have that difficult choice to make.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think that it's something that people should be thinking about. That's all. It like you said, it may not be now, but wouldn't you want to be out ahead of a big cultural shift in the acceptance towards, you know, this kind of thing?
That's the question: is whether, you know, it pays to get out ahead of it, or whether, you know, you figure that later on you can still make that shift and like not
get away with it.
You can get away with it, and not be like.
And then should you be thinking of more than just getting away with stuff, or should you, you know, be practicing what you preach in terms of corporate values? Yeah. So.
A lot for discussion.
Yeah.
We have a question actually from someone too. It says someone's question is, I think the era of big companies is over. Most are posting losses, some are fending off takeovers, and almost all are laying off jobs to cut costs. What is your view? The era of big companies are being over.
Well,
I don't see it being over in a way, because I think that you know, we're still seeing kind of acquisitions, and if anything else, we're still talking about kind of larger takeovers even from larger companies kind of moving in. So, and not only if many are kind of posting losses, it's probably because of a shift in the industry, but usually the answer that they'll run to, right or wrong, is, okay, let's get bigger. We'll find more efficiencies, right, by putting more things together and getting even bigger. And so, I don't, you know, perhaps it's the era of, you know, the industry as we know it, and maybe the kind of, you know, the business model as we know it is over, and or is on its way out, and or constantly evolving. But right now I can't see companies getting smaller.
I can't see anything that's actually over, but there may be shifts that are happening. But that strikes me as a little bit of, you know, maybe perhaps wishful thinking. But yeah, it's like I don't think there's anything so grand happening. But the shifts that are happening within our particular industry are certainly causing a lot of changes and a lot of.
Anyways, thanks for your question.
That's great. We
welcome
really appreciate it.
Welcome even more. Next week, just a little plug for what we'll be bringing out. We'll have more premium content. As you may know, we're unveiling the 40 under 40 this year. Sort of, we're teasing them a little bit. We're unveiling them about 10 people at a time. So we have right now already unveiled half of our list, 20 of the 40. So we'll have another 10 on Monday that we're going to disclose. So we'll have the top 30 so far, under 30, under 40, and that'll come out on Monday. And as well, working on a piece on millennials as well. That's
millennials, like the stereotypes of millennials, and whether or not it's really true, but brands are all catching on to it, like travel economy, transparency, brand transparency. So there.
In September, as you know, we sort of looked at the other side of the coin, the kind of the ageism and kind of, you know, whether or not the kind of the stereotypes about kind of older, people in kind of our industry hold true or not. So we're giving, some of the younger generation there too as well. So anyways, that's Highs and Lows this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot.